Victoria Vance moved through her client pitch like a shark through water, sleek, powerful, and with an unnerving ability to smell blood, or in this case, a seven-figure budget. We were in our main conference room, a glass and chrome box on the 50th floor of a Chicago skyscraper, the city sprawling below us like a blueprint of our own ambition. Our potential clients, a trio of stern-faced executives from a tech giant called Innovate Corp, were the biggest fish we had tried to land all year. Victoria was in her element. She wasn't just presenting a proposal. She was performing a one-woman show. "We don't just plan events, Mr. Chen," she said, her voice a low, confidential purr. She paced in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette of power against the brilliant blue sky. "We curate experiences. We build narratives. Anyone can book a ballroom and hire a caterer. We create legends. My role in this theater was to be the silent, efficient stagehand." I sat at the head of the table, my laptop open, my expression a mask of calm competence. When Victoria would say, "Grace, bring up the renderings for the immersive lighting concept," I would click. My mouse and a stunning 3D model of a ballroom bathed in holographic light would fill the 80-inch screen. When a client had a question about venue capacity or vendor insurance, Victoria would wave a dismissive, elegant hand and say, "My logistics lead, Grace, has all the granular details on that." And I would provide the crisp, correct answer, without missing a beat. For an hour, Victoria sold them a dream of their annual Visionary Awards Gala being the most talked about corporate event of the year. A dream of seamless technology, of Michelin star quality food, of an evening so flawless, so perfectly executed that it would echo in the halls of their company for years to come. She was brilliant. She was a magician. And like all magicians, the real work was being done by an invisible assistant she kept hidden up her sleeve. That was me. "The details in your proposal are exhaustive," Mr. Chen, the CEO of Innovate Corp, finally said, breaking a long, tense silence. He looked from the final slide of our presentation to me, then back to Victoria. "Your logistics and contingency planning are particularly impressive. Ms. Hayes," he added, giving me a slight appreciative nod. I felt a small, warm flush of pride. Before Victoria could speak, I replied, "Thank you, sir. We believe a flawless event begins with a flawless plan." Victoria smoothly reclaimed the spotlight. "Grace is my secret weapon," she said, smiling a dazzling proprietary smile, as if I were a particularly clever piece of software she had invented. "She handles the nuts and bolts so I can focus on the big picture, the vision." Mr. Chen stood up and extended a hand to Victoria. "Well, your vision is very compelling. You've got the contract. Have your people send the paperwork over to my people." The room erupted in a quiet, professional sigh of relief. It was a massive win, the biggest of the year. I watched as Victoria, radiating triumph, walked the clients to the elevator, laughing and schmoozing, already accepting their compliments for a party that had not yet happened. For work she had no intention of doing, I stayed behind in the conference room to gather my things. The remnants of the successful pitch were scattered across the table. Empty coffee cups, scattered notepads, and the heavy thick binder containing the Innovate Corp proposal, a document I had spent the last 2 months of my life creating. The door opened and Victoria glided back in. The dazzling, charismatic performer was gone. The moment the clients were out of sight, her face had relaxed into its default expression, a kind of bored, entitled weariness. God, I need "A drink," she said, kicking off her high heels and sinking into a chair. "Did you see Chen's watch? Tacky. All that money and no taste." She gestured vaguely at the massive binder on the table. "So, that's all settled. I'm exhausted. You've got this from here, right?" "Got what, specifically?" asked, my voice carefully neutral. She looked at me as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "All of it, Grace," she said with an impatient wave of her hand. "The details. The contracts, the vendors, the timelines, the seating charts, the work." She stood up and stretched. "I'm the vision, you're the execution. That's our system. It works." She picked up her sleek, expensive handbag. "Send me a weekly summary, but only if there's a fire. I've done my part. I sold the dream. Your job is to make it a reality." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the colossal, terrifying weight of her promises. I sank into a chair, the adrenaline from the presentation draining away, leaving behind the familiar, soul-crushing exhaustion of my actual job. This was our system. It had been our system for the 3 years I had worked under her. She would paint the masterpiece in the air for the client. And then she would hand me a tiny, single-haired brush and a thimbleful of paint and expect me to replicate it on a canvas the size of a city block. I opened the binder, the smell of fresh ink and paper rising from its pages. As I looked at the first page, the ridiculously ambitious timeline she had promised my mind flashed through a quick, painful montage of past victories. The time she had booked a keynote speaker for a tech conference but had forgotten to book his cross-country flight. A fact I discovered at 11 p.m. the night before the event. I had spent all night on the phone, finally finding a seat on a 4 a.m. Radian had driven him straight from the airport to the stage myself. Victoria, who had been sleeping, later took credit for my nimble last-minute problem-solving. The time she had approved the proofs for 500 engraved awards without noticing the client's company name was misspelled. I had caught the error as the boxes were being unloaded and had spent 8 hours with a team of interns, using tiny dental drills to carefully scrape the extra letter off each individual award. Victoria had called it a minor typo and praised my attention to detail in the post-mortem. The time she had sworn to a client she had secured a block of rooms at the Four Seasons, when she had only made a preliminary inquiry. When I discovered the hotel was fully booked, I had to personally call the concierge of every 5-star hotel in Chicago, cashing in every favor I had, until I had cobbled together enough suites to avoid a catastrophic embarrassment. Victoria had called me a miracle worker in her report to the partners. I was her miracle worker, her secret weapon, her janitor. I was the one who followed behind her grand visionary parade with a broom and a dustpan, quietly cleaning up the messes she left in her wake. And she, in turn, took the bows, the bonuses, and the credit. I looked down at the Innovate Corp binder. It was the biggest, most complex event of my career. 1,000 moving parts. 100 things that could go wrong. 1,000 details that Victoria would never even think to consider. I took out a fresh legal pad and a pen, and I began to do my job. Her job. Both of our jobs. The familiar, heavy weight of it all settled onto my shoulders, but this time it felt different. It felt heavier, and for the first time a small, dangerous thought flickered in my mind. What if just once I let something drop? The Innovate Corp Gala was the big, terrifying storm cloud on the horizon. But as any event planner knows, it's the immediate squalls that will drown you. The crisis, when it came, was not for the big, important client. It was for a smaller, but still significant event, the Northwind Financial Summit. A 2-day conference for a group of notoriously demanding investment bankers. Victoria, naturally, had handled the initial client's schmoozing and then promptly washed her hands of the actual logistics, leaving the entire execution to me. The breaking point arrived at 5 p.m. on the Friday before the Monday summit. It came in the form of a polite, confused email from the lead client at Northwind Financial. Subject: quick question on catering. Hi Grace, looking forward to the summit on Monday. One quick question. My assistant reached out to the catering company, Divine Morsels, to confirm their arrival time, and they said they have no record of our event. I'm sure it's just a mix-up, but could you please confirm? I stared at the email, a cold metallic taste of pure adrenaline flooding my mouth. A mix-up? No, I knew Victoria's methods. She had likely had a wonderful, charming phone call with the caterer months ago, verbally agreed to a menu, and then, in her own chaotic, vision-focused way, completely and utterly forgotten to sign and return the contract or pay the deposit. I pulled up the vendor file. It was empty. There was no contract, no invoice, no confirmation number. I called Divine Morsels, my heart hammering against my ribs. The catering manager was sympathetic but firm. "Oh, I remember speaking with Victoria Vance," she said. "She sounded lovely. But we never received the signed contract, so the date was never confirmed." "We're completely booked on Monday, ma'am. There's nothing I can do." I hung up the phone. 250 investment bankers were arriving. In less than 72 hours, expecting a full day of catered breakfast, lunch, and cocktail reception. And I had no food. This was not a minor oversight. This was a 5-alarm, career-ending fire. And Victoria, the person who had started it, was unreachable. Her out-of-office reply stated she was at a wellness retreat with no cell service. The weekend was a descent into a caffeine-fueled hell of my own design. I did not go home. I did not sleep. I lived in my office, the glow of my monitor my only companion. My first 50 calls were a bust. Every high-end caterer in Chicago was booked. It was a Monday in June, the height of corporate event season. Finally, at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning, I found a possible lifeline, a new upscale restaurant that did some catering on the side. I woke the owner up with my frantic call. I begged. I pleaded. I leveraged a past relationship with their produce supplier to vouch for me. I agreed to pay a 100% rush fee. They agreed. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic, high-speed logistical gymnastics. The new caterer had a different menu, which meant I had to contact the client for approval and then have all 250 custom-printed menus reprinted. They required a different floor plan for their setup, which meant I had to scrap the existing seating chart and redesign the entire ballroom layout. A task that took 8 straight hours. Their insurance was different, which meant I had to have our legal team Roshapa a new vendor contract on a Sunday. I was a one-woman army, fighting a war against a deadline fueled by sheer, stubborn terror and an endless supply of coffee. I was the fixer, the miracle worker, the secret weapon. And by 8 a.m. on Monday morning, when the first of the bankers arrived, the crisis was invisible. The breakfast buffet was steaming, the coffee was hot, the new menus were pristine, and the event went off without a hitch. It was a flawless success that no one in attendance knew had been a hair's breadth away from being a complete catastrophe. I got back to my apartment at midnight on Monday, fell into bed fully clothed, and slept for 10 dreamless hours. When? I walked into the office on Tuesday morning, exhausted but proud. I expected a quiet thank you, a relieved email, a simple acknowledgement from Victoria of the heroic career-saving feat I had just pulled off. Instead, what I saw in my inbox made my blood run cold. It was a company-wide email sent from Victoria that morning. Subject: a huge success. Northwind. Financial Summit Team. I want to extend a huge congratulations to everyone involved in the successful execution of the Northwind Financial Summit yesterday. As many of you know, we faced some unexpected last-minute vendor challenges. But thanks to the nimble leadership and grace under pressure of our amazing team, we were able to pivot seamlessly and deliver a flawless event for the client. This is what we do best, turning challenges into opportunities. So proud of this team. Best, Victoria Vance, Senior Director of Events. I read the email 3 times, the words blurring into an insulting, infuriating smear. Nimble leadership, grace under pressure. My name was nowhere. My 72 hours of sleepless, frantic, soul-crushing work had been completely erased, absorbed into her triumphant first-person narrative. She hadn't just taken the credit. She had rewritten history, casting herself as the calm, capable captain who had steered the ship through a storm she herself had created. I felt a profound cracking sound deep in my soul. It was the sound of something breaking. The sound of the last stupid, hopeful part of me that thought my hard work would one day be recognized. Finally giving up the ghost. Later that afternoon, Victoria, tanned and glowing from her wellness retreat, glided over to my desk. She didn't mention the Northwind Summit. She didn't mention the catering disaster. She didn't mention my sleepless weekend. She just dropped the 3-inch thick Innovate Corp gala binder onto my desk with a heavy, dismissive thud. That thing was a nightmare. She said with a dramatic sigh, gesturing to the Northwind file. But crisis averted. Anyway, time to focus on the big one. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the Innovate Corp logo. I've CC'd you on the preliminary emails. All the big pieces are in place verbally. They just need your magic. She smiled, a dazzling, empty smile. I'll be in the Hamptons for the next week, doing some client networking with the CEO's wife. So I'll be completely unreachable. I trust you to handle everything. I stared at her, then at the massive binder, the symbol of my next all-consuming, thankless task. I thought of the misspelled awards, the unbooked flights, the phantom hotel rooms of my past. I thought of the company-wide email, of her taking credit for the 72 hours of my life I would never get back. I thought of her, tanned and rested, about to depart for a week of cocktails and beach parties while I was expected to stay, hear and execute her vision. And in that moment, the cracking sound in my soul became a clean, quiet, and definitive snap. Of course. Victoria, I said, my voice a perfect, cheerful imitation of my old, compliant self. You can count on me. She beamed, completely oblivious. I knew I could. You're the best, Grace. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. I looked down at the Innovate Corp binder. My magic. Yes. She was about to see my magic. She was about to discover what happened when her secret weapon, her janitor, her miracle worker, decided to do her job, and only her job. She was about to find out what happened when I did Victoria's delegated tasks with the exact same level of care, attention, and follow-through That she would. The era of Grace, the heroic fixer, was over. The age of Grace, the malicious complier, had just begun. The week Victoria was in the Hamptons was the most difficult and the most liberating of my professional life. When I came into the office on Monday, the mountain of work she had left for Metha Innovate Corp Gala binder no longer looked like a threat. It looked like a weapon. I sat at my desk, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and I made a quiet vow. I would not quit. I would not complain. I would simply do my job. And I would do the tasks Victoria had delegated to me. Nothing more. The era of Grace the miracle worker was over. The age of Grace the meticulous employee had begun. My first task was to handle the catering. I found a scribbled note in Victoria's file. Divine Morsels spoke to Celine. She's great. They can do the steak option. There was no contract. No proposal, no confirmation number. Just a name and a vague verbal agreement. The old Grace would have panicked. She would have called Celine, begged her to send the paperwork, chased down the contract, confirmed the menu down to the last garnish, and not rested until the deposit was paid and the confirmation was in her inbox. The new Grace did something different. She looked up the number for Divine Morsels and called. "Hi, Celine," I said, my voice a mask of professional politeness. "This is Grace from Synapse Dynamics, following up on behalf of Victoria Vance regarding the Innovate Corp Gala. Victoria mentioned you had discussed the steak option with her. I just wanted to touch base on the status of that." "Grace," Celine said, her voice friendly. "Yes, I remember speaking with Victoria. She sounded lovely. We're still waiting on the signed contract and the 50% deposit. Once we have those, we can lock in the date and the menu. We're getting very busy, so the sooner the better." "I understand completely," I said. "Thank you for the update." I hung up the phone. Then I drafted a new email. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. Every instinct in my perfectionist, problem-solving soul screamed at me to fix this, to chase the contract, to force the confirmation. I took a deep breath and forced myself to type the email I needed to send. Not the one I wanted to send. To Victoria Vance CC, Events Department Archive Subject, Follow-up, Innovate Corp Gala, Catering. Hi Victoria. Per your request, I followed up with Celine at Divine Morsels regarding the catering. She confirmed that to secure the booking and the steak menu, she requires a signed contract and a 50% deposit. Please advise on how you would like to proceed. Best. Grace I attached a blank copy of the caterer's contract. I read the email. It was perfect. It was polite, professional, and it placed the responsibility exactly where it belonged, with Victoria. I hit send, knowing full well it would go to her unattended inbox, a digital tree falling in an empty forest. Then I went into my project. Management software, found the task, finalized catering, and marked it as completed, awaiting director approval. It wasn't a lie. I had done my part. The fact that 250 executives were on track to eat chicken instead of filet mignon was no longer my problem. My next task was the awards. Victoria had forwarded me a hastily typed email with the subject line, "Gala Winners Urgent." The body of the email was just a list of 3 names and their award titles. Visionary of the Year, Stephen Chen. CEO, Innovate Corp Innovators Award. Dr. Anya Sharma Pioneers Prize. Julian Croft. My eyes immediately snagged on the first name. Stephen. Chen, I knew for a fact because I had spent 2 months preparing documents for him. That the CEO of Innovate Corp spelled his first name, Stevien, the old Grace would have died of a panic-induced heart attack. She would have called Mr. Chen's executive assistant to triple confirm the spelling, updated the document, and sent a fawning email to the engravers with the correct information highlighted in yellow. The new Grace took a deep breath and fought back the urge to fix, to control, to be the hero. I opened a new email. To crystaltrophies.inc.cc, Victoria, and subject: engraving list for Innovate Corp Visionary Awards High Team, or the final list approved by my director, Victoria Vance. Please see the attached names and award titles for the Innovate Corp Gala. Please proceed with the engraving as specified. Thank you. Grace I attached Victoria's original, uncorrected email. I did not fix the typo. I simply forwarded the error, creating a perfect, unbroken chain of command. My job was not to be Victoria's editor. My job was to execute her directives. I marked the task completed, sent to vendor. The final and most terrifying act of malicious compliance involved the audio-visual setup. The Innovate Corp team was, like most tech companies, obsessed with their presentation. Their technical writer was a 20-page monstrosity of jargon, detailing specific projector resolutions, aspect ratios, audio codecs, and lighting cues. It was dense, confusing, and filled with a dozen potential points of catastrophic failure. The old Grace would have spent a full day translating this document into a simple one-page checklist for our AV vendor, complete with diagrams and a color-coded timeline. She would have had a 2-hour call with the vendor to walk them through it, line by line. I stared at the PDF, my stomach churning with anxiety. This was the highest stakes part of the plan. A catering mix-up is embarrassing. A typo on a trophy is mortifying. But a complete technical failure in front of a room full of tech executives. That was a public execution. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I am the vision. You're the execution. Victoria's words echoed in my head. My job was to execute my assigned tasks. I opened a new email. I attached the 20-page PDF to Premier AV Solutions CC Victoria Vance subject: Innovate Corp Gala Tech Writer Highmark. Please see the attached technical writer from the client for the Innovate Corp Gala. Let me know if you have any questions. Best, Grace I. Hit send. It was the professional equivalent of throwing a lit match into a fireworks factory and politely asking the security guard to keep an eye on it. The vendor, without my usual simplified guidance, would almost certainly misinterpret the specs. But my task, send writer to a V, was done. I marked it complete. The week crawled by in a haze of this newfound, terrifying freedom. I received a single breezy text from Victoria midweek. Hope you're not too stressed, sweetie. The sun is amazing out here. I replied with a photo of my project management dashboard. All the tasks for the gala marked a satisfying, deceptive green. Everything is proceeding according to the project plan, I wrote. All assigned tasks are being actioned in a timely manner. Enjoy the sun. Friday. The day before the gala, my work was done. I looked at my meticulously documented paper trail. The email chains, the completed task lists. I had built a perfect, unbreachable fortress of plausible deniability. I had done everything I was told to do. And in doing so, I had orchestrated a disaster of epic proportions. I stood in the now empty office, looking out at the Chicago skyline. I felt a sickening, exhilarating cocktail of pure terror and absolute power. I had meticulously, perfectly, and competently set the stage for a complete and utter failure. The time bomb was set, and I was the only one who could hear it ticking. The grand ballroom of the Peninsula Chicago was a symphony of Victoria's vision. The lighting was a warm amber glow, the floral arrangements were obscenely large, and 200 of the tech industry's most powerful figures were mingling, champagne flutes in hand. On the surface, it was perfect. I stood near the back of the room, a ghost in a black dress with a headset, my clipboard held against my chest like a shield. My heart was pounding a steady, terrified, and exhilarating rhythm against my ribs. I was the sole engineer of a beautiful, magnificent train, and I knew that in a few short hours, I was going to watch it go off the rails in spectacular fashion. Victoria was in her element, a shark gliding through a sea of money and influence. She was attached at the hip to Mr. Stephen Chen, the CEO of Innovate Corp., her laughter bright and tinkling, her hand resting familiarly on his arm. "Victoria, the room looks magnificent," I heard him say as they passed by me. "As always, a flawless execution." "Oh, you know me, Stephen," Victoria purred. "I'm a perfectionist. I don't believe in cutting corners." The lie was so audacious I almost choked. I just adjusted my headset and pretended to be intensely interested in the movements of the waitstaff. The first corner she had cut was about to be served on a silver platter. As the cocktail hour progressed, I saw Mr. Chen politely decline a chicken satay skewer from a passing waiter. A moment later, he casually asked another waiter, "Are the steak tartare canapes coming out soon?" The waiter, a young man who was not paid enough to lie to a billionaire, just looked confused. "Sir, I'm sorry. The only hot appetizer we have tonight is the chicken satay." Mr. Chun's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw Victoria notice. She immediately steered Mr. Chen towards another conversation, then peeled off, her face a mask of fury, and stalked towards me. "Grace," she hissed, her voice a low, vicious whisper, her smile still plastered on for the benefit of the room. "Where is the steak tartare? I promised him steak tartare." The steak tartare was part of the premium menu option in the contract that was never signed. "Victoria," I replied, my voice a perfect .com and maddeningly neutral monotone. I held up my clipboard, per my follow-up email, to which you, RCCD, the only menu Divine Morsels could provide on 48 hours' notice was their standard executive package. That includes the chicken. I have the email chain right here if you'd like to see it. Her eyes darted to the clipboard, then back to my face. She saw no panic, no apology, just the cold, hard, documented truth. She was trapped. A muscle in her jaw twitched. "Fine," she spat. "Handle it." She turned on a dime, her designer gown swirling around her, and glided back to the CEO's side, her dazzling smile back in place. The second disaster struck after dinner during the main presentation. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Mr. Chen took the stage to give his keynote address, a multimedia presentation that was the centerpiece of the evening. He nodded to the tech booth at the back of the room. His presentation flashed to life on the 3 massive, wall-sized screens that flanked the stage. But it was wrong. The images were stretched, distorted, the carefully designed text warped and slightly fuzzy, as if being viewed through a funhouse mirror. The aspect ratio was a mess. Mr. Chen, a man accustomed to technological perfection, stopped mid-sentence. He stared at the distorted image of his own face on the screen, a look of profound annoyance clouding his features. A low murmur rippled through the audience of tech executives. My headset crackled to life. It was Victoria, her voice a strangled, furious squeak. "Grace, what is happening? Fix this. Now." I keyed my mic. "I'm speaking with the AV team lead," I said, my voice calm. As I watched the team at the back of the room frantically trying to adjust their settings, he's saying the projectors they have on site are a 4:3 aspect ratio. The client's tech writer specified a 16:9 widescreen format. So tell them to switch projectors. Shrieked into my ear. "They can't," I replied. My voice still even. "These are the only projectors they have in their inventory." They said if they'd had a simplified action plan or a prevent confirmation call, they could have sourced the correct equipment, but as it was, they had to interpret the client's 20-page document themselves. The silence on the other end of the headset was more damning than any scream. She had no one to blame. She had been the one who was too busy recharging to have that call. Mr. Chen, after a painfully awkward 30 seconds, was forced to continue his presentation with the distorted slides. A public display of technical incompetence at his own awards gala. But the main event, the real spectacular career-ending implosion, was yet to come. It was time for the awards ceremony. The Pioneer's Prize went off without a hitch. The Innovator's Award was fine. And then it was time for the grand finale. The Visionary of the Year Award. A drum roll played. A single dramatic spotlight hit a server in the back of the room who began to walk a magnificent, multifaceted crystal trophy on a velvet pillow towards the stage and the 2025 Visionary of the Year. The announcer boomed, the leader whose work is shaping the future of our industry. Mr. Stephen Chen. The room erupted in applause. Mr. Chen, his good humor somewhat restored, walked onto the stage beaming. He shook the announcer's hand and accepted the heavy, expensive-looking award. He held it up for the flashing cameras of the event photographers. He smiled, looked down at his trophy, and the smile froze. It was a subtle thing at first. His expression just stopped. He tilted the award slightly, as if to catch the light better, his brow furrowed in confusion. A few people in the front row, who could see the award up close, stopped clapping. A confused whisper began to spread through the room like a virus, and then I saw it. On the massive, high-definition screen, which was now showing a live close-up of the trophy in his hands. The beautiful, sweeping, and deeply engraved letters. Visionary of the Year Stephen C.H. and Stephen with a P.H., not Stephen with a V. The silence in the room was now absolute. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew. Mr. Chen's face, which had been annoyed by the projectors, now hardened into a mask of pure, cold, and unforgiving fury. This was not a technical glitch. This was a profound, personal, and deeply insulting act of incompetence. I felt Victoria grab my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep like talons, her perfectly manicured nails breaking the skin. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice a strangled, barely audible sound of pure panic. The crowd, the client, the partners, they were all forgotten. Her entire universe had narrowed to me, her last desperate hope for a scapegoat. I didn't pull my arm away. I just looked at her, my expression calm, my eyes holding hers. And I delivered the final fatal blow. "I've done exactly what you instructed, Victoria," I said, my voice quiet, just for her. I lifted my clipboard. I forwarded the list of names you sent me, exactly as it was written, directly to the engraver. I executed your vision. I tapped the printed copy of her original email. the one with the typo, which I had clipped to the top of my board. My job was to handle the logistics. And the logistics of this particular disaster, as you can see, are perfectly documented. I watched as the last bit of color drained from her face. I watched as her eyes darted from the email on my clipboard to the furious CEO on the stage, to the horrified faces of our company's partners in the front row. I watched her realize that her safety net was gone, that there was no one left to blame, that she was utterly, completely, and publicly alone in the middle of the magnificent disaster she herself had created. I gently pulled my arm from her grasp. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, my voice a model of professional decorum. "I need to go speak to the caterers about the dessert course." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the ruins, a silent, beautiful, and perfectly executed vision of her own failure. The next morning, the office at Synapse Dynamics was as quiet as a tomb. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the fallout from the disastrous gala. There were no cheerful greetings at the coffee machine, no morning chatter. Just the grim, low hum of an office bracing for impact. At 9 a.m. sharp, an email from the senior managing partner's assistant appeared in my inbox. The subject line was a single ominous word: post-mortem. I was summoned to the main boardroom. When I walked in, the atmosphere was funereal. The firm's 3 senior partners were seated at one end of the massive marble table, their faces grim. On the giant video conference screen at the far end of the room, the face of Stephen Chen, CEO of Innovate Corp., glared out at us. His expression a mask of cold, controlled fury. And sitting alone, looking pale and ravaged, was Victoria. She shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred as I took a seat at the opposite end of the table. "We are here." Mr. Sterling, the senior partner, began, his voice a low rumble too. "Understand the cause of the catastrophic multi-point failure at the Innovate Corp. Gala last night. An event which has done significant, perhaps irreparable, damage to this firm's reputation." He looked at Victoria. "Victoria, you were the senior director on this project. The floor is yours." Victoria took a shaky breath, composing her features into a mask of wronged professional indignation. This was her last stand, her final desperate attempt to find a scapegoat. "Thank you, Charles," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "As you all know, I put my heart and soul into the vision for this event. But the vision is only as good as its execution." Her eyes swiveled to me, pinning me with an accusatory glare. Grace, as my logistics lead, was responsible for all vendor management and final confirmations, the catering, the audio-visual, the awards. All of it was her responsibility. I delegated those tasks to her in good faith. And she, through a shocking and unprecedented display of incompetence, failed at every single one. She sat back, her accusation hanging in the silent room. The partners all turned to look at me. Mr. Chen's furious eyes bored into me from the screen. This was it. The moment she had been setting up for years. The moment she would throw me under the bus to save herself. I did not fluster. I did not get defensive. Simply reached down and placed my own binder on the polished table. Its cover, a neat, unassuming black. It was my paper trail. My fortress. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Chen," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Victoria is correct. I was responsible for executing the logistical tasks she assigned to me, and I have the documentation to show that I executed each of them precisely as directed." I opened my binder. "Let's start with the catering," I said, my tone as calm as if I were giving a weekly progress report. Victoria has stated that she had a verbal agreement for a premium steak menu. However, the vendor required a signed contract and a deposit to confirm. A fact I communicated to Victoria via email on October 12th at 9:15 a.m. I slid a printed copy of the email. Chain across the table. As you can see, I followed up as requested. When no directive to sign the contract was given, I was unable to proceed. The failure was not one of execution, but of approval. I continued, my voice even and methodical. Regarding the audio-visual failure, my assigned task was to forward the client's technical writer to the vendor. Here is the email sent on October 15th, showing the complete 20-page writer was sent to Premiere AV as instructed. My usual process, as you know from my past projects, is to create a simplified action plan and hold a technical call to avoid precisely this kind of issue. I was not directed to do so on this occasion, so I stuck strictly to the assigned task. Finally, I arrived at the grand finale. And regarding the unfortunate misspelling on the Visionary of the Year award, I said, looking directly at Victoria, who was now staring at me with a look of dawning horror. My task was to send the list of winners to the engraver. Here is the original email I received from Victoria on October 22nd at 4:30 p.m. with the name spelled STPHN. And here I slid another paper across the table, is my sent email from 4:32 p.m. Forwarding her original unedited list directly to Crystal Trophies, Inc. The error originated from the directive I was given. I closed my binder. I performed every task I was assigned. The catastrophic failures of the evening were not the result of my incompetence. They were the direct, predictable result of my not performing the senior director-level duties of contract approval, quality control, and final review that I was not authorized to perform, and which have, on all previous projects, been the invisible foundation of our success. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The partners were staring at the impeccable, undeniable paper trail I had laid out. They were seeing for the first time the truth of our working relationship. They were seeing that my magic had been me doing two jobs, and the moment I had stopped, the entire system had collapsed. It was Mr. Chen who finally spoke from the screen, his voice dripping with a cold, clear, and furious understanding. "So, to be clear, Mr. Sterling," he said, "your senior director here is a charismatic fraud who handles the handshaking. And this junior planner, Ms. Hayes, is the only person at your firm who actually knows how to run an event. Is that the situation?" Mr. Sterling looked at the evidence. He looked at Victoria's pale, terrified face. He looked at my calm, neutral one. He had no choice but to admit the truth. "It appears so, Stephen," he said, his voice heavy. "I see," said Mr. Chen. "Then my next steps are clear. We will be terminating our contract with Synapse Dynamics, effective immediately. We will, however, be extending a personal contract, offered to Ms. Hayes to help us plan next year's gala, assuming, of course, that she will be available." Victoria made a small, strangled sound. Mr. Sterling looked at her, his expression now completely devoid of sympathy. "Victoria," he said, his voice like stone, "please wait outside." She stood up, her movements stiff, and walked out of the boardroom. A woman who had just become a ghost in her own company. The senior partner then turned to me. The look on his face was one of deep apology and a newfound profound respect. "Grace," he said, "it seems we owe you an apology and a promotion. The senior director of events position is now open. Clearly, You have been doing the job for years. It's time you had the title and the salary that goes with it." I simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I accept." My revenge was complete. I hadn't lied. I hadn't sabotaged. I had simply done my job and nothing more. I had stopped being the hero. And in doing so, I had let the truth of Victoria's incompetence come to light all on its own. I had won by letting her lose. And it was the cleanest, most satisfying victory of my life. 3 months as the senior director of events had felt like 3 years. I sat in my new office, Victoria's old office, but it was mine now, the ghost of her chaotic energy long since exorcised. I had replaced her abstract art with framed, architectural blueprints of famous Chicago landmarks. Her ridiculously expensive but uncomfortable designer chair was gone, replaced by a sensible, ergonomic one. The space was no longer a stage for a performance. It was a functional, organized workshop for a woman who got things done. The culture of my department had begun to change too. The constant low-grade hum of anxiety that had existed under Victoria's reign of unpredictable delegation was gone. In its place was a quiet, focused energy. I had implemented new systems, clear project management software, detailed vendor protocols, and a strict no-verbal agreements policy. There were no more fires to put out, no more weekend emergencies. We were simply a team of competent professionals doing our jobs and doing them well. It was amazing how smoothly things could run when the person in charge actually understood the work. The ultimate test of this new era arrived in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. It was an email from Mr. Sterling, the senior partner. Subject: a second. Chance Grace, Stephen Chen from Innovate Corp called me this morning. He was surprisingly open. He acknowledged that their new event planning firm is a disaster. He said, and I quote, "They talk a good game, but they can't execute. We miss the competence of Ms. Hayes." He has agreed to a meeting next week to hear our pitch for next year's gala. This is our one and only shot to win them back. The ball is in your court. Don't miss. I read the email, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across my face. This wasn't just about winning a contract. This was about redemption. Not for me, but for the firm's reputation. A reputation I was now responsible for. The pitch meeting was held in the same conference room where I had been the silent, invisible stagehand for Victoria's one-woman show. This time I was the one standing at the head of the table, but I was not alone. I had brought with me my new project lead, Sarah, and our lead technical designer. Mr. Chen and his team looked wary when they walked in, their expressions guarded. They were expecting another dazzling but hollow performance. I gave them something else entirely. "Mr. Chen," I began, my voice calm and steady. "Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm not going to sell you a vision today. Already seen what happens when a vision is disconnected from reality. Instead, I'm going to present you with a blueprint. A detailed, realistic, and fully transparent plan for a flawless event. For the next hour, we didn't just show them beautiful renderings. We showed them the scaffolding that held the beauty up. We presented a meticulous step-by-step logistical plan. We showed them the triple-bide vendor selection process I had implemented. We walked them through our new rigorous quality control and proofreading system for all printed and engraved materials. When Mr. Chen asked a complex question about integrating their new streaming software with the in-room AV, I didn't give a vague, charming answer. I turned to my tech lead. "It's a great question, sir. Ben has actually already done a full compatibility analysis. Ben, Ben, who under Victoria would have never been allowed in the same room as a client, stood up and confidently walked Mr. Chen through the technical specifications, his expertise obvious and impressive. When a question about event flow and guest experience came up, I turned to Sarah, who presented a detailed minute-by-minute timeline that anticipated every potential bottleneck. I was not the star of the show. I was the conductor of a highly skilled orchestra, and I made sure every single musician had their chance to solo. We were not selling a dream. We were demonstrating our competence. When we finished, Mr. Chen was quiet for a long time, looking from me to my empowered, confident team members. This feels different from our last set of meetings, Ms. Hayes. He finally said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. It feels like I'm talking to a team of professionals, not just a very talented salesperson. He looked directly at me. It feels solid. It feels real. I like it. He stood up and extended his hand. Welcome back to the Innovate Corp account. Don't make me regret it. We won't, I said, shaking his hand. The grip firm and respectful. After the clients had left, my small team and I remained in the conference room. The energy, a pure, unadulterated buzz of shared victory. That was amazing, Grace, Sarah said, her eyes shining. Victoria would have never, ever let us speak in a client meeting like that. That's because Victoria thought she was the only one who mattered, I said, looking at my talented, dedicated team. She thought the vision was the most important part. But a vision is just a pretty ghost if you don't have a team that can build it a body. I gathered my notes, a feeling of deep, quiet satisfaction settling over me. My revenge on Victoria had never been the goal. It had been a byproduct. The goal had always been this: a workplace where competence was valued, where details mattered, and where credit was given to those who actually did the work. I had not just won a new job or a bigger office. I had won the chance to build a better system, to create a culture of respect. And as I walked out of the conference room, followed by my happy, empowered team, I realized that was a victory far more satisfying than watching one incompetent woman fail. It was the victory of watching a deserving team finally, truly succeed.